LTV, can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear, JP. Thank you.
Casey, thank you very much. Are you ready for us?
We are streaming and we are good to go.
Okay.
All right. Welcome, the Board of Education and East Hampton Union Free School District. Welcome you to our first ever East Hampton Affordable Housing Forum. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has come out to discuss solutions to this challenge. Hiring and retaining staff have always been a challenge here in East Hampton. Housing prices and traffic have significantly impacted our ability to hire and retain instructional and support staff within our school system. If the current state of affairs continues to exist, we will not be able to fill key positions in our schools. We all know the issues. There is not enough affordable housing and rental properties for our staff. In some ways, this has been the case for many years, but now it's become worse than ever. The pandemic has helped increase the number of homes that are available for our teaching and support staff. Even if you are able to find a home 30 miles away in the town of Brookhaven, you'll be strapped with huge property taxes. This is a conundrum. Tonight we will discuss solutions. Nothing is too far out of the box, and we call upon our elected officials, our government agency partners who work with us and our school district to find effective solutions to these challenging issues. I think I'm going to turn it over to you. You want to outline how we're going to the evening.
Good evening, welcome. We just want to keep this short. I'll leave it to Jackie as far as our should moderate this event. We're trying to keep it to 2 hours. We're trying to be as non-political as we possibly can. So we're not here looking for anything. We're just looking, well, we are looking for a solution. We don't have answers starting at this point here, but I think we all put it together as a group, as a group faith, group thought on this. I think we have a chance of settling our issues, and they are large. I'm going to transfer it over to Jackie to get started. Just wouldn't waste anyone's time. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll try to.
Can you hear me? Should I just start that? Okay, thanks. I'll just go like this for a little bit. I wish we were all around one big circle. So we just, because of COVID, have to be spread out a little bit. We're going to try and keep this as moving quickly. I'll do my best to do that. Thank you so much all for all of you coming out tonight. I just wanted to say just a couple of things. The board spent some time talking about this before, and I think we said that out, talking a little bit about vision and goals of the meeting so that we were all on the same page here. But really the vision broadly here is that East Hampton strives to be a vibrant learning community which can attract and retain exemplary staff by ensuring the availability of affordable housing for its employees. The goal is to bring together stakeholders, and thank you so much to our, to our supervisors, to our center, to everybody else who's come out here today, school board members, so many of you I want to meet you all. I thought that if we were to have gone around and call on everyone to say 4 minutes or 5 minutes, we'll use up our entire meeting. So we're not going to do that today. Instead, what we're really going to do is focus on objectives, which are the tangible next steps that we can start to. This is the first of what I think will be several meetings on this. So we really want to see if we can leave this meeting today with a good thing on ideas and how to achieve the goal of affordable housing, recognizing that the school district is not the only employer in this town who's having difficulty. I know the town is having difficulty. I know local businesses having difficulty, but we look at it as a school district as an existential crisis that we are facing now in our ability to educate our kids in the future, as many of our long-term teachers start to retire in the next 10 years. So anyway, with that, what I'd love to do is ask our assemblyman, I know you've just been very active in passing legislation, and I think it'd be very helpful as maybe a touch point for you to start and kick us off and tell us a little bit about that and what we can do with that. Thank you. And I'm sorry if I'm not doing illustrious introductions. Thank you for all you do for us.
It's fine. You didn't call any of us any names or anything.
No, we think you're all
But first of all, this is such a crucial issue, not just in East Hampton, not just in the school district, but across the South Fork and across the East End. And I commend the school board and the superintendent and the administration for, facing this issue head on. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight with our town supervisor and members of the town government to talk about this with you. And the one thing I'll just say from the side, at the beginning, I heard JP said, this is going to be non-political, and I have a flashback. I used to be the planning board attorney in this town. I remember being at a public hearing in this very room where somebody, at a big public hearing, somebody got up and said they didn't want something to be political. And those of you who remember and know Stuart, the late Stuart Warple, Stuart strode to the podium and said, "Politics is in everything but very deep sleep." And in Albany, I think it's apparently very deep sleep also. But anyway, this is a community problem, and I appreciate that's how we're going to try to address this. So let me tell you about the state legislation. And I see this. I don't think there's any silver bullet. There's no one answer to all of the housing issues that we are facing, but we need as many tools in the toolbox. I think this legislation, the Peconic Bay Region Community Housing Fund, is potentially could be one of the bigger and better tools in that toolbox. I would describe it as somewhat as the sister legislation to the Community Preservation Fund. The Community Preservation Fund has had great success over the last 25 years, helping us to preserve our community character, whether it's been open spaces, farmland, wetlands, access to the ocean, water quality. But if people can't afford to stay here, that's part of community character also. So in essence, the Community Housing Fund, which was adopted and signed by the governor just about a month ago, is an authorization to the 5 East End towns to be able to establish a community housing fund. That community housing fund can be used for a whole wide range of housing opportunities, providing financial assistance to first-time homebuyers, construction of new housing, whether it be for rental purposes or for home ownership, rehabbing existing buildings, buying interests or buying existing houses or interest in existing houses. Basically, anything that you can think of that might assist in providing affordable housing for working class people who are trying to stay here in this community. The fund can be used for those purposes. Building housing, financial assistance, as I said, the whole gamut. So that is really the purpose of the fund. Now, how this would work is state legislation, as I said, is authorizing legislation. It authorizes the town to set up these funds. What is it that the town will have to do? To some degree, my part of this is over because the state legislation has been adopted. Now it will shift to the towns. And the first thing that a town has to do, it has to take a number of steps. The first thing that it would have to do is to create a housing plan. And in the town of East Hampton and under Supervisor Van Scoyak's leadership, a lot of that planning, a lot of that work has already been done. But they have to have a plan. In essence, they will have to tell the public how they're going to spend the money if they set up the fund. So whether they're going to focus on financial assistance to first-time home buyers, or they've got a number of construction projects or rehabilitation projects, they will have to put together a plan that will tell the public how the fund is going to be, just like they did with the Community Preservation Fund. They had to identify what land should be acquired, and they have to be in the plan. So the first step is to prepare that plan. The second step is each town would have to pass a local law to implement the fund, to create the fund, and that the creation of the fund is subject to a mandatory referendum. So the public will ultimately get to decide whether they like the plan and whether or not they want to create a community preservation fund. And So the question is, how is it going to be financed? We made a couple of changes with regard to the real estate transfer tax. Right now, there's a 2% real estate transfer tax. That money goes for land preservation and for water quality improvements. This law would allow the town to add an extra 0.5% to that real estate transfer tax. At the same time, there's an existing exemption on the transfer tax, which is $250,000 for every transaction. First-time home buyers who meet the income levels or are already exempt from that tax, but everybody gets $250,000. The first $250,000 is not subject to the tax. And this will tell you why, perhaps why we are where we are. That $250,000 was set in 1998 when the Community Preservation Fund was established. And that was the median price of a house in 1998, $250,000. So that exemption as part of this would also be increased to $400,000. So for all, now will be all transactions under $2 million, the first $400,000 will be exempt. What does that mean? It's that in funding this community housing fund, as I said, first-time home buyers are exempt, but for those transactions under $2 million, basically, if you are buying a house for $1 million or less, you will pay less tax than is currently the case on a closing. And if it's more than $1 million, you pay more. I don't think I'm telling anybody any tales out of school that none of you had figured out without taking a math class here at East Hampton High School. But the overwhelming amount of money that is generated through the transfer tax in the town of East Hampton is transactions that are $3 million, probably 90% of all the revenue. So you know, the goal of this is to raise money for housing through an extra 0.5%, but to increase the exemption so those that are in the lower cost of the housing market are actually paying less than they pay now. It is estimated that in the town, and it's hard to make these estimates because right now, you know, I could give you historically what the Community Preservation Fund has generated. And probably for most of the time between the end of the Great Recession and between the Great Recession and the pandemic, East Hampton town was probably generating somewhere around 30 million for open space. So figure a quarter of that would be 7 or 8 million a year. In the last 10 months, the 10 months of 2021 in the town of East Hampton, the Community Preservation Fund has generated $56 million. You know, across the 5 East End towns, the Community Preservation Fund would generate about $90 million a year. And this year, it's going to generate over $220 million. So that gives you an idea. You know, that's why inventory is down. That's why prices are up. There's such demand for people who want to buy houses out here, and that's why we're here. So, but that's how this would be funded. So, you know, it would generate, this tax would be in effect until 2050. You know, probably a good estimate is that it would generate probably $7-8 million a year in the town of East Hampton. And over the next 20-some years, almost 28 years, it could generate probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $200 million for affordable housing. Why do I mention the life of the program? Because the town has the ability to bond against that, just as they did with, you know, the towns bought land up front. They wanted to buy it before the land disappeared. And you know, they bonded it, and now they're, you know, they have to pay the debt service on that. But when interest rates are where they are now, that's not a bad thing to do. So they would have, the town would roughly have about $200 million of revenue for the life of the program that they would be able to bond against it, currently low interest rates. So they can front load and get this program off the ground. So that is in a nutshell. You know, the state legislation is in place. The town has to do a plan. The town has to pass a local law, and the public would have to approve this in a referendum. You know, and I've explained how it would be funded and what we could expect it to generate. And, you know, it's something that I think won't solve the crisis all by itself. It certainly would. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Brennan,
Who's any
I have a
of
question.
Yeah, John.
Do you think the Community Preservation Fund has in any way made the affordable housing harder to be? Is there any study that, I mean, all this money is being spent taking land that cannot be built? Is there any?
Yeah, I would say, I think the answer to that is unalterably, no, it's not. Because first of all, the lands that we're talking about are environmentally sensitive lands that were not suitable, where you shouldn't be developing anyway, and certainly not increasing density. So, every town has a comprehensive plan. They decide, what land should be protected, what land should be developed for residential, what should be for commercial, what should be industrial, and they have a balanced plan. The lands typically that the town purchases, and Peter could probably talk to this better, are not typically where you would be putting, affordable housing. That's number one. The other thing that I sometimes hear is, well, the town and the towns are out there buying land and, they're taking it out of circulation, even though these were not areas where you would do high density development, but that somehow the town buying land is driving up the price. I'm going to just compare these two things, and you tell me what you think is the bigger factor in where we are right now, which clearly has been accelerated by the pandemic. But by definition, out of a year of the real estate market, all the town is getting is 2% of all the real estate activity that's happened in the town of East Hampton. And after you take out for water quality and for the incidental costs, survey, planning, all the stuff that goes along, maybe somewhere around 1.5%. The town of East Hampton has maybe has got 1.5% of the money that's out there in the real estate market. So do you think it's the town and they're between 1 and 2% of where they're out there buying land? Or do you think it might have to do more with the fact that the pandemic has accelerated this also, but that Wall Street profits 100 miles away from us are at all-time highs and that interest rates are at all-time lows, and that everybody who, and that's again accelerated by the pandemic. But I think it has very little to do with the Community Preservation Fund and a lot more to do with the fact that we are in a community where there's incredible wealth, in the financial center of the world, the entertainment center of the world, the media center of the world, and they have resources and they want a second home on the east end of Long Island. And their desire for a second home, or in many cases, maybe a third home or a fourth home, and their ability to outcompete people who live here looking for a first home, I think has a lot more to do with that. I mean, there's literally billions and billions of dollars that are getting spent on real estate. So I just think it's the nature of our location. And yes, we're guilty of protecting this and making this a more beautiful place and people want to be. I think that, the pandemic has accelerated all of this. And I think that's, our ability to manage things when suddenly, the Community Preservation Fund is generating 90 million because it's a function of real estate activity, when, the number of sales is doubling and tripling in a very short period of time. Yes.
To piggyback off that, I would think that even properties that the town is pursuing, probably getting outbid by people that actually want to buy them. I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, there's some truth to that too, and that, everybody's, look at all the money the Community Preservation Fund is generating, but, they're in the same marketplace as everybody else. What the town could buy for $1 million and what they can buy for it today is different too.
Yeah.
The thing about the Community Preservation Fund is that it helps preservation and conservation keep pace with development, and that's, I think, has been the benefit. But tonight it's housing that we're talking about, and I think that the factors that have contributed to this sudden acceleration in a trend that had been, affordability had been a trend that had been becoming more difficult, but just accelerated by the pandemic. I think it has a lot more to do with historically low mortgage rates, interest rates, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average is like 35,000.
Right, I just have one more question.
Sure.
With the increase of the 400 for the deduction with a improved property, what are they doing for land? Because I believe land is only 100 or.
Yeah, we didn't change that.
That's the same? Okay.
Yeah, and quite frankly, if you look at, sometimes I feel like I need to get a life. I actually took 1 year's worth of transactions and looked at every single one of them. And there's not a lot of vacant land out there. 95% of these transactions are on.
For sure. Does anyone else on the board have a question for this?
Yeah, who determines what's affordable or what's low income?
Great question. And, in the community housing law, we are using the income levels and a multiple of the purchase price levels. We're using the state of New York mortgage agency, Sony May. We're using their income levels as to, eligibility.
Wouldn't it make sense to do it in your area?
Well, it is for our area. They have 10 regions, and they have an area for Long Island. The income level here, actually, the median family income on the east end of Long Island is lower than Western Suffolk and Nassau County. Believe it or not, people that live here year round. But instead of using the Sony May numbers, we're using 1.5 times the Sony May numbers for purchase price, which would be around $1.2 million in law. So, that is in the law, and that goes, as Tom Wolf would probably say, that those get adjusted every single year based on what's going on in the market. But I think the median family income for a 1 or 2 person family to be eligible under this program would be an income of about $155,000 a year or less. And to be eligible, and the purchase price would have to be roughly 1.1 million or less.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
No. Does anybody else have another question for some of them?
I have a question. So it's just for the town, at the town level. What about the villages? We have a lot of little villages. Do they just, they're going to follow what the town does?
Yeah, the town administers the fund, and just like with the Community Preservation Fund, whether it's the Village of East Hampton or the Village of Sag Harbor, if they have a project, they would work. I think actually in East Hampton with the CPF, they have an intermunicipal agreement for the use of the CPF. They and probably would do something similar with regard to housing. So the village would participate, would get together with the towns.
Which is a perfect segue to our town supervisor, perhaps, if you're able to stay.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Very, very helpful. I think it's very helpful to start off to understand some of the tools at our disposal, and perhaps for our supervisor, if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts that what the town board is doing right now with respect to the housing plan, housing fund, and how you envision moving forward with the tools that we've had there, and anything else that you want to add on that right now.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here today and participate, which what I think is really the most important issue that we're facing as a town right now, as much as the airport and sea level rise and coastal erosion and any number of other issues we face. This one, I think, has the potential for the greatest negative impacts on our town. It's something we really have to address. I also want to thank the Assemblyman Thiel for creating the Community Preservation Fund and getting that done, and then now the Housing Fund on that model. And we look forward to working as a town board to inform the community about the plan, to get everybody interested and in support of that referendum, which will come next November. Because to me, this is going to be job number one. It's all hands on housing come January 1st when the new board takes over and starts working on issues. We are in transition now, meeting pretty regularly, at least once a week, to discuss this issue specifically and how we're going to address it in the coming year. I want to tell you that East Hampton's historically been extremely active in trying to provide affordable housing. We have well over 600 units of affordable housing within the town currently. I think it's the highest per capita housing units anywhere on Long Island. And, that's a tribute to boards that came before and had the foresight. It's been difficult to live here in East Hampton for all the reasons that Assemblyman enumerated, that if you rely on a local income, it's almost impossible to compete with outside money. And that's been a pattern. I'll tell you a quick story about a young couple, newly married, who were in the community. They were trying to find housing. They could only afford a winter rental. And then summertime, this is a young teacher, right, in this very institution here. And the husband worked in building carpentry, and the two of them struggled and moved 7 times in 2.5 years with housing. That was over 30 years ago. And that couple was my wife and I. And as you know, Marilyn taught here for 27 years and retired about 4 or 5 years ago. But it was difficult then, and I can only think that it's nearly impossible now. And with the pandemic taking what was already a crisis in housing and really pushing it well beyond what we ever would have expected. Every single available house out here was occupied starting in March of 2020. And I know you real estate agents in the room can attest to how quickly any available rental was taken up. Many of the houses that were traditionally rental houses turned over and flipped with the rising prices, cashed out. And that's where we are now. I think the CTF, the Community Housing Fund, will be an extraordinarily helpful tool. The town has in the past bonded, used money out of surplus on several property acquisitions. We purchased 12 acres on a 395 Punico Road after struggling for, I think, almost 4 years to try and acquire that one piece of property. It took that long. We purchased the piece from the Triune Baptist Church a number of years ago, and we've been adding parcels adjacent to that, trying to expand that property. We've just put an affordable housing overlay on the 395 Panico Road property. We're in the process of doing the same for the Route 114 property. We've been working with the Housing Authority for the Gansett Meadow project, which is done. The Manor House project, which the town built, is completed, and folks are moving in. That's the first ever homeownership condominium model in New York State. And again, I want to thank Fred for helping us get through the AG's office on that, because nobody had ever seen anything like it before. And that took extra time. There are a number of obstacles that we face. I heard one of the board members mention, well, is the town having to compete, with other buyers? Absolutely. In every single time we look at a property. We've also had properties that we've identified large enough for affordable housing projects. And when the owner finds out that we're selling for affordable housing, we're purchasing for that purpose versus open space, they're not interested. So, there are a number of problems and obstacles that we face, but we're committed to moving forward and trying to do the very best we can. We know the school is having issues.
You're adding an affordable housing overlay to those specific properties. So there is a process where the town can take a property that's not zoned in affordable housing and create an affordable housing?
Yes, that's exactly right. And the purpose of doing that is that allows us to have greater density on that property than would otherwise be realized if it was just developed privately for market rate housing. So for instance, the Panago property, we purchased half of that property, roughly half of it outright with general municipal funds and the other half with open space funds. in developing that 12 acres, we figured that roughly 50% would be putting as a set aside anyway. But we would be able to take, and I think it's A5 zoning. So on that property, what was left, you have one single family home, perhaps two, depending on how you carved it up. But this would allow us to do up to 8 units per acre if for apartments, I believe. They're under the town's current legislation code. It's 2 houses, 2 individual houses per acre. The county allows up to 4. So one of the things under discussion is to relax the town code regarding the densities for single-family homes. We are developing apartments, condominiums, and single-family homes, and we're trying to build as many single-family homes as we can currently, because having that commitment of home ownership within the community, we think really provides additional benefits. That the person in that property has a stake in the community for the long term, and we think that makes a difference as well.
Peter, just a quick question. Regarding the type of building that we would be doing, that the town would be doing for the affordable housing, is there a way to make sure that the people that get that affordable housing are actually within the community and not, not coming from outside,
Right.
sort of in?
So there are a lot of fair housing laws that come into play, and more strings attached, and the more money you accept in the form of grants.
Right.
That was gonna be I was more of an ask than a question. No, it's all right.
Does that apply to this fund? Because you have control over
Right.
this
And
fund,
that's
so
the
this would
perfect
be a fund that
opportunity.
East Hampton Town's making a plan for East Hampton community members.
Just to
right?
add to that, I saw something in the Suffolk Times today, or yesterday, talking about Southhold, who had just passed affordable housing legislation where you could redevelop in commercial districts, buildings, repurpose them and build up to 6 units. And, excuse me, in their rule, they specify that it could be residents or people currently employed in Southhold.
That was gonna be my ask, is that when you do have this legislation, it's more an ask than a question. This is the perfect opportunity, since you're gonna have a fund for it and have a little bit more backing. Can we make it so that it's for, people that already reside in East Hampton, whether it be with their parents or family, or they're struggling, however they are struggling to be here, A, and B, can we also use it for, can you make an exemption for someone that's gonna maybe work for the town, work for the school district, join a fire department, police department, municipal anyway? I'm saying if you could put those things, sort of sprinkle them through your legislation, that might just help everyone. You may have already thought of these things, and I'm sure you have. But I think it just needs to be said, because I think every time we see something get built, and I think those that pay attention understand that it took federal money, you gotta open it to this group, it took state money, you have to open it to that group, it took county money, you need to open it to this group. I just think that we, in my personal opinion, we should try to go away from that as much as we can, so we're not so locked in. There's gonna be some instances where you can't avoid it, I understand it. But I just think it's really important to be able to sort of focus on the pool of people we already have, and also the pool of people we need. Because in order for our community to continue to run, we do need to bring some people from outside, because there's not enough, there's less and less every day. So that pool is shrinking, so we do need to pull from the outside. And, I think we all have a obligation, I guess is the best way to put it, on all the facets of solving this issue, because that one issue is not going to solve the entire thing, as Fred said. But at the same time, and we have some union leadership, and forgive me because I can't see people very well with masks on, so it's a little hard, but, we do need to step up to the plate there too, and offer some incentives through our unions, and, John, you can yell at me if I'm speaking out of turn over there. But, these things need to be done, and at the end of the day, all the equation comes down, it's gonna cost our local taxpayers more money. And do they wanna invest the money in at the end of the day, it comes down to our families and kids. And I, for one, do wanna do that, but I need, more participation. There's a lot of empty seats here tonight too. And I know we changed our meeting because we had a weather incident the last meeting, but there's a lot of signs with people that said they were coming and they're not. And I'm not trying to call anybody out. Things happen, and I'm sure there's something that's beyond their control in some instances. But I mean, even the public, I know there's more people that need housing
I think
Where are you?
they're discouraged.
I get it,
They're
but-
discouraged.
You know, they're gonna be their own best advocate at some point, you know, but
Well, we
that's just.
also, in fairness, we also did say that this is more geared toward justice.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true, that's true.
To the point that, you know, we want to build housing for those within the community that have that need. You know, I think almost everybody agrees with that, and within the constraints of the law, we certainly, that would be our goal, is to
And do
build
you think
housing
you'll
for
be
those.
able to do that? I don't know, is there anything limiting in the legislation that would prohibit the town from setting up in their housing plan,
Well,
saying,
I'm not going to advise on the federal fair housing laws and what that requires them to do. But in the state legislation, we talked specifically about being either living or working in the town. We also had a provision in there, or had lived in the town, I think in the last 5 years.
right,
Because people who had to leave,
Yeah.
we want to be able to bring them back.
right.
And I welcome them, that'd be great to see that.
Yeah, so but, you know, that's in the legislation. I know there are people that are probably better versed in some of the federal fair housing laws and what you can do with,
So we all have a little bit of understanding of it. too,
Yeah.
but-
You know, I think it's important to understand that even the projects that had outside funding, that the vast majority of people living in those homes came from within the community or worked in the community already, so.
That's good to know.
It's a high percentage. I think, you know, the most recent one was something like 87%. So I understand we don't want to be spending our transfer tax money to build affordable housing so people can come from other places.
Yeah.
That's not solving our local problem.
Right, I think our main
Of
issue
keeping
is
people
that
here.
we're in the town right now from everybody in the community is the flight of our middle class. And our students are even picking up on it at this point, you know, like, they're not gonna be able to come back here. So we're looking at this tonight as like more of a staffing issue, but our students, the vast majority of them have no hope of ever coming back and staying in their hometown as it stands right now. So we are teetering on the edge of, and, you know, and some are saying, you know, we're on the other side of the edge of our entire middle class. So when we call it affordable housing, you know, maybe that's not really the term that we want to use. Maybe we want to call it working class and middle class housing because.
Attainable housing is a.
Yeah, attainable, sure.
Because everybody doesn't.
Well, I think that's important too, because there's still an awful lot of people in this community and from beyond who really think that affordable housing means low income housing.
Yeah.
And it
I
really
don't
means
think
just
that
people who have to
six
earn
figures
income.
And, you know, cannot afford housing, you know, and well into 6 figures in income, and they cannot afford homes here. So we're at a point that we're not just talking about, you know, it's piggybacking, you know, and so we're at a level where the vast majority of people who live here year round are fleeing or have plans to flee. And some of them have, you know, 3 jobs. I have employees who work for me who it is their second and third job, and a lot of them actually work for the school in town. So they have really good jobs, and they're working a lot, and they're working all summer, and they're working their weekends, and they still cannot afford to stay here. And if you lose your rental right now, you mentioned before, a lot of people that are landlords are cashing out. They took this opportunity to cash out. So a lot of people that I know are losing their year-round rentals
So they have to
and are literally have nowhere to go at this point. And these are people that have steady, good jobs with benefits and pensions and, you know, so it's really a distressing level in our community.
Absolutely is. No sector of the economy, institutions, the hospital has trouble attracting doctors. I mean, you know, we're not talking about low income housing issues alone. This is every aspect of our community. And, you know, it threatens to really destroy the community that we know. So that's why, you know, we've really taken it on as being a primary issue that we have to address on a town board level. And again, you know, the community housing fund will give us the, you know, certain tools. We would be able to help subsidize the purchase of existing homes and existing neighborhoods in the community. And I think that's important.
Right.
Because there's a finite amount of undeveloped land. If you try to figure out how many units you could actually build, we're down to less than 10% of buildable vacant land now within the community. So
once the CPF fund no longer has anything that they can buy and preserve, can we take that money and?
that's a
repurpose
fair.
it?
Yeah, that's staying for right now on this, because I think that we're talking about something important. We don't to perhaps throw it out and get some other thoughts too, which is construction is sort of a limited option. We're not going to be able to build enough houses to solve this whole problem out here. So, you know, what are our options there? And I think that we've had discussions. Number one, I just want to speak for the school district for a moment. The school district is a willing partner. We write articles about other school districts that build housing or that provide benefits, do other things. And I think the school district is very much looking at itself as a willing partner, which is why we gather people here, because we're looking for other ideas about things that we can do, ranging from purchasing housing, building housing, looking to see whether or not there are programs wherein landlords have tax forgiven, are there tax credits to landlords where their property taxes are forgiven in some way if they're renting at a certain level. I mean, all sorts of out of the box thinking like that to try and increase more quickly the pool here. And I don't know, Supervisor, if you or anyone from the audience wants to sort of throw some ideas like that out there right now.
So one, there are a number of things within our zoning code that we've put in order to address housing, and they haven't been taken full advantage of. Accessory apartments, detached accessory structures, so you can build a cottage on your property if it's 3/4 of an acre or more. And I think really one of the issues there, the biggest issue, is that unless it's for a family member, there's not a lot of incentive to do this, because the capital costs of making those improvements, the payback, I just did some quick math, looking at me doing it, and it was 15 years to pay off those capital improvements. And,
But yet there are a lot of parents that I've spoken to who are on a half acre and would like to.
So half acre, this is one area where we could talk. So we could talk about, again, relaxing some of the existing rules to make it for half acre, for instance. The other thing is you're allowed to have up to 20 accessory apartments in a school district. I think East Hampton is probably reaching that 20 max number, and some of the other districts are close. And so, contemplate whether or not to increase that number of affordable accessory apartments within existing homes to increase. I know there's
that
been
would actually increase density, either if it is, if you are taking care of an elderly parent moving into your property, or your children come back and want to stay here and they need someplace that you don't want them in your basement for a few years and they need their own living space. You already have those people in your home. So, if you can move them out, you still have the same number of people living on the property. So you're not really increasing the density, you're just increasing your living area so that everyone has their own space if they cannot afford to spend $1.5 million on their first home. I've had a lot of parents make that point to me.
I just want to bring up, we're in the education business, and I think we do a good job, right? I like our school, I like our staff. We have great kids because we have great parents, right? But now we're going to get into the housing. We're considering building rental units. We can do that. Probably we have the room to do that, right? And the good thing is that the taxpayers have to approve that in our budget. We got direct, in other words, we just can't go spend money, and we've got to get taxpayer approval. We could use help and guidance from Tom Rule and the town on how to build it. We don't have to worry too much about zoning requirements. Let's say we wanted to build 20 rental units, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for our staff. We think we need to do that because we're suffering from being able to hire good staff. We got to always hire the best, but the best, if they don't live out here, they're not coming, all right? So maybe we can attract them, all right? Maybe we can attract them with this idea of our own, let's say 20. We probably might be able to find room. And so I want to pursue how you guys can help us, because we're in the education business. We don't, we'll take input from our parents and anybody else about that, but we don't know much about housing. We need help because we want to hire the best. And when we hire a good teacher and he comes from Up Island, we have many, many cases. As soon as they get, they'll get tenure and they got the job here, but as soon as they don't live out here, when they can get a job back in their hometown, because we've made them good teachers, away they go. We just lost a great high school principal that way.
Well, and we're also not retaining.
Only trying to commute from Manaville. The commute ate them up. And so
We're also.
we are serious about a labor shortages that we think we pay a good salary for our teachers. My kids get mad at me because when I'm on the school board, I tell them they're well paid, they don't. But anyway.
On the flip side of that too, we're losing our.
That's what we're looking to do. And I hope we can do it, because I don't see any other solution.
Would we be able to ask the town for some of that money?
Or even a partnership.
Well, partnership, we also have the ability to bond. I have seen, and I don't know if there's anyone in the audience, raise your hand, I'll have it pull them. I've seen articles about school districts throughout the country who are building and bonding and partnering to do school housing. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has any familiarity with that at all. There's lots of articles on it right now. But I do think that if it was a cost share kind of program, I think.
We're not the only place where that is experiencing this. Right?
Correct. And every district, San Francisco, Cupertino, places where you have, high net worth individuals that are competing with, there's only.
The fund does provide for partnerships,
Okay.
not just public-private partnerships, but even public-private partnerships.
Well, that's
Employee
another
housing.
thing too.
I'll say that the town is willing to partner with anyone who can help us solve this crisis. I think it's in everybody's best interest and, it benefits the entire community. I do think it's really important to have as many teachers, living within the community as
And staff,
possible.
it would
And
be
I know
staff.
when my wife started teaching here, about 90% of all the teachers live within East Hampton or very close across the border of Town Line Road. And now I think it's probably flipped. It's probably 90% of teachers are traveling in from outside and only maybe 10% live within the immediate community.
Well, even like our bus drivers, some of them have to be here at 4 and 5 in the morning, so commuting is not ideal for them as well.
It's also nice to keep the taxpayer money in the community.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm paying
absolutely.
people who actually live here.
And we invest all this in our kids and we teach them well and we get them on their feet and they go off to college and they can't come back. So we've like, you're sort of just like throwing your, listen, you're gonna do well somewhere else and that's what we all want. And some don't want to come back. But, I have that in my own house. My daughter teaches first grade out of state. She knows to come back. She'd love to, but she doesn't want to live with me. So, there you go. I mean, what do you do?
But they need to be able to have that option.
Yeah.
And then,
correct.
we spend a lot of time promoting, vocational ed programs
Yeah.
to try to match our students
Yeah.
with the skills in the industries in our community.
The needs.
And then you look at the next step and you say, they're gonna be living in their parents' basement for the next 40 years. I mean, like, there is no room for growth at the level that it's at right now. And I want to ask a side question. When you do the lotteries for the affordable housing, is there a way, within the guidelines that you can sort of like assign extra points to people who are going to volunteer for the local fire department, or an EMT? Is there a way to that would give them, a bump up? So it's not just on income, but it's also on community service. So that, sort of gives it also people an incentive, because we don't have a lot of, we're always struggling to get enough EMTs and firemen and volunteer firefighters. So maybe you kill two birds with one stone by doing something like that, but I don't know that.
Do you want to?
I can give you the two versions answer to that. Tom will
Director of Housing for the town, proud East Hampton High School graduate. I'm not gonna say when. But there weren't any trees around here. No, well, okay, sorry.
High school was on Newtown.
No, not that old, but, this building was very new when I went here. So anyway, that gets into a tricky territory. Because the last time the town tried this, we wound up with more preference people than non-preference people. Because we wound up saying, okay, well, teachers, healthcare professionals, town employees, village employees. Then we got complaints that we were ignoring veterans. So we said veterans. Then some disabled advocates said, well, what about the disabled? I mean, by the time we put them all together and social engineered it, one of the then town board members said, okay, so what's the difference between a guy driving a snowplow for the town and a guy driving a snowplow for a private vendor? Everybody went, good point, not much. We need snowplow drivers, whether they're driving for the village, the town, or private contract. So that's how the town went to the not social engineering model. The sad truth that everyone has said, be it the school districts, be it the accounting firms, which have now, an accountant told me, opened an office in Riverhead because they could get the accountants to Riverhead, get the work here, ship it up to Riverhead, because they couldn't get accountants here. Those are the kind of jobs that we all, when we went to college, we all, those are the ones you aspire to. But if you aspire to that, you still can't live there. So everyone's in the same boat. And personally, I'm not an advocate for trying to social engineer which group, other than live or work in the town of East Hampton, has a preference. There are places that have tried preferences. A lot of times preferences have been challenged on equal protection or Fair Housing Act, particularly as they could discriminate against the disabled or the elderly, if you're going with certain preferences because those people are excluded. So that's why it's an issue. It's an issue because you want to treat everyone equally fairly. Now, in some cases, it's equally unfairly if you have 12 units and you have 331 people on your list. That speaks more to how we need more units. And to answer a previous question, we'd be happy to help. And I know that I don't want to speak for Katie Casey, the executive director of the Housing Authority, but I am. The Housing Authority would be happy to help. And they have much better expertise on rental housing. And we're really good experts on selling people houses, single family and other things like that. But speaking from my office, we would be happy to work with you to do that. The bigger issue is, of course, getting the transfer tax passed, and the town can't take a position on that. But our road show over the next year until next November is going to be trying to brainstorm through the Community Housing Opportunity Fund to advise the town board on what should be in that plan. And we want input from everybody, and it's gonna be a road show. Then to put a plan together, vet that plan, and hope that what that plan sets forth as a future goal is something that the voters can get behind here in East Hampton. Only has to pass East Hampton for East Hampton. Southampton has to pass their own, Shelter Island has to pass their own. Through the efforts of Assemblyman Thiel, the 5 East End towns, departments like mine, are working together to try to have a sort of a coordinated approach for the 5 East End towns. What benefits Southampton town, what benefits Shelter Island, benefits us, because then we're not, we're all in this giant boat together or whatever. But that is the $1 million, everybody said it already, but we've got to get the good ideas that can come out of almost everywhere. Anybody who's worked with me knows I know a good idea when I steal it. But get them all into that report. We have on our website at Housing and Community Development, and also at Planning, the existing Community Housing Opportunity Plan. That is a plan we've done
It's backed by statistics and demographics that prove what we all know to be true, the housing problem out here. And it has some of the ideas we've had for creative solutions, thinking out of the box. Depends on how far you want to get out of the box. Parking garages with apartments on the second floor. I once was almost thrown out of a meeting for saying that out of the box comment. But there are
And why
places where you
couldn't
can
we
do
do
that. What?
Right.
Why couldn't we do that?
You could do that. I've seen them in Freeport, Maine, where I happen to go to because my wife loves LLB, has stores on top of a parking garage on the
Works
side of
very
it.
well.
The minute I saw it, I said, you can put apartments on the top, keep your parking. That way you have land that's currently being used for parking, now being used for both housing and parking. When I suggested this, it was a couple of years ago. It was like, but when you say think out of the box, that's what you're gonna get from me. But it's ideas like that we're gonna try to put into the plan, try to say, these are things we can do. And we're looking for input. I mean, for want of a better term, there is no one answer, there is no, one magic bullet for the town. I'm not talking about for the school district. There may be, if you build a certain number of units, you'll be able to tie them to teaching positions. But for the town, we have all kinds of issues, from even just finding workers for half the year in Montauk. And they're dying out there. We're looking for ideas because we want to put the ideas in the plan and then back that plan with the money. And if it all comes together, we get the voters to vote for it.
I actually went to a meeting at the village 30 years ago, it had to be, and they were talking about putting a parking garage on the back lot. And it never went anywhere, yeah.
Well,
But again, like some of those things really need to be revisited, and there's always that segment of our population that is immediately going to come out against everything. And I think sometimes we listen too much to that small segment, and at some point we have to start looking at the overall big picture of just what we stand to lose here in this community, because we are a community in crisis right now. So, I think it's worth revisiting some of those kind of controversial ideas. Like our idea to possibly build on our own property is going to be, controversial for some.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is if you think about it, it's already been done by hedge funds in Montauk that own certain businesses, Gurney's being one of them, went out and bought a bunch of motels. Because they said, look, we can't find help. What can we do? They had the financial resources. They went out, they started buying motels. Now,
and there's pushback against a lot of local businesses. They're all being told to,
it's hurting the local businesses.
Right.
But as that employer, you're making an economic decision saying, I need to invest in the infrastructure, and that consists of housing for my employees. So,
but I know several local people that are trying to do that, and they're also facing roadblocks.
There are roadblocks.
From here to Southampton, there are roadblocks being set up, and the employers do finally come out and say, fine, we're going to put some housing up, and then it's not here, you're not.
Hey, to me, it's an amazing accomplishment that a school board is actually here advocating for housing, and I don't have to come here and explain why we're trying to build housing. It's not the apocalypse. I mean, and you are all to be commended for that. And as you well know, the bulk of the affordable housing in the town is in East Hampton School District. And this district has been great. I mean, but we all know what district I'm partially talking about that acted like.
Doesn't the town own some land there?
Yes, we do. And you go there and it sounds like it's the end of the world.
Right.
But you're right. We have to get past that. But we have to have people understand, because people say, well, Manhattan, not everybody can afford to live in Manhattan. I said, yes. And when are we building subways to planners? I mean, but that is the argument that I'm not 100% convinced that this passing is a slam dunk. I think it will pass, but I think it does. Yeah, I think it needs heavy lifting to make the valid point to everybody. This affects everybody.
Yes.
I think the bigger issue people may have concerns about is that extra 0.5% as being some sort of they may not do the same math as you, some sort of a continued barrier, because those taxes are a big hunk of cash upfront for closing costs. And that extra 0.5%, I think.
That's not, it won't be a barrier. I mean,
I'm not saying it is. I'm
they're
saying
gonna,
when you're
the
talking about
opposition is gonna be people who don't wanna live next to fill in the blank.
Yeah.
They won't say it, they won't publicly say that because that's not the publicly correct answer. But they're of the mind that they want, they're gonna sell their house, they're going to fill in the blank, South Carolina, Florida. They don't want anything to affect the value of their house and they don't wanna live next to those people. But they won't say that, so they'll say, if you're,
Traffic.
Well, those people are.
well, see, this is the
It's always
thing.
the environmental or the traffic, it's one of the.
Well, the traffic, I love traffic because we haven't been building, we built some affordable housing. It's the law of unintended consequences, which they used to teach us in economics class. You've got more traffic because you have less people living here.
Right.
Because they have to drive
You
here.
can have.
You know, people used to say to me, why do the schools close so early when there's a snowstorm? Because people are getting up at 4 a.m. to drive here. You got to give them some warning. You can't wait till 7:30 to see if the,
You don't live here.
yeah, if you lived here, you could wait till 7. So,
But
you
your bus
know,
driver's like an hour away, they're leaving the house at 3 in the morning.
exactly. So you need to make a decision quicker. The people living in town, I don't think understand the dynamic completely of what it's like when everyone's commuting here. When you're a police officer, how do you have a detective live a mile and a half, an hour and 45 minutes away? That these are real on the ground things. And I think finally the pandemic has forced this issue to the forefront. And you all are to be commended for having us here. I will sit down.
But I think one of the things, I'd like to take a few minutes, we have a lot of people here, and I'd like anybody who wants to address the issue to maybe come up. We're trying to keep it to 3 or 4 minutes. If you'd like to come up and address what we said, and ideally any ideas that we have first. Your hand went up first, you can say your name, and then Joe second, and then I see you over there first. Hi, Howard. Third. But we're gonna try this, we can get everyone in, if you could, we're trying to do like 3 or 4 minutes or something.
Okay, who's Carolyn? I'm Bonner, and I work for Bill Easton's over here for a long time. I started in affordable housing in the Marine Corps. There were things I liked and things I didn't like. Then I built Habitat Humanity houses out here in Southampton to Montauk. We built 14 Habitat Humanity houses. There were things that were really, really good and things that didn't work so well. As we all know, that Woods had its issues. Then I got involved with the town's affordable housing program in 2000 with Barbara Jordan and came up with the idea of manor houses, which are just about to be opened up, I hope, and filled. The manor house is a wonderful idea because it doesn't make people throw stones at something they don't like or looks. I have had death threats because I live on a native reservation on Chickasaw. I know what it means to try to put something up as affordable housing in communities where they feel their property values are going to be hurt. Well, guess what? That's our argument today. Everybody's property values are sky high. So I would recommend, from my experience of 45 years in jobs and affordable housing, that you look at every single opportunity and engage with the town and suggest that the mother-daughter unit, that the apartments over stores, that the manor house projects, which include 6 or 7 different units in one large home, which looks like a wonderful big house. Every single way that you can manage to come across with a benefit for an older couple who are happy to have somebody live in an apartment in their house, help them generate the kitchen and the extra door and whatever is needed for that, who would love to live in their house, but they know it's nice to have somebody else living there too. And how many teachers in this town, I graduated from East Hampton in '66, lived in these houses with these kinds of arrangements? with older people and other people. Not everybody needs to have a brand new spanking unit. The issue of equity has always been on my mind with, housing out here, because the fact is that most people can afford apartments in here, no matter what you do for a living. So we have to let the equity go. But we need teachers, we need admin, we need maintenance. All my kids graduated here and went off into the world and did great things, but they can't live here anymore. And I'm 12th generation. So I'm saying go after every single way you can work with the town. And I think Tom will probably work with you. There have been all kinds of fences we've had to jump in the past over income, over how long you plan to stay, over all kinds of things. But I believe that we have a situation now where we're all in desperate straits. Every business in town can't find employees. Every school in the town of East Hampton can't find employees. And I don't think that the numbers in the schools are going to go down. I think they're going to go up. They are going up already. So I'm saying you have 4 different options. You have a manor house concept, which the town is just about to put people in. You have apartments, you have mother-daughters, and you have something else that somebody wonderful other than these who come up with this support, and you offer incentives and opportunities, and you get moving, because when this is voted on, you should have your shovels ready next year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So,
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having this forum for us to discuss this topic. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Joseph Sanacola. I'm the president of the East Hampton Teachers Association. I'm a 22-year teacher here in the district. I wanted to briefly just give you a quick bio of myself because I think it fits perfectly with what we're talking about. I moved out to East Hampton 22 years ago. I graduated from college and I got my job in East Hampton right out of school. I was fortunate enough to have family that lived here. I slept on a trundle bed with a Pocahontas blanket and my niece, but my cousin slept right next to me. She was coming to school with me in the morning. She was in the elementary school and I was one of that, how do we get that teacher out here? So I was able to make that transition because of family. I then purchased a house in East Hampton. I was a first-time home buyer right before the other affordable housing projects came through. My house was then, it was difficult to sell because of all of the environmental restrictions that were gaining popularity within the community, not as a negative, but just as a reality of what was happening. And the town purchased my land as CTO. I was then looking for a house to buy and I was pushed out into, I met my wife from Southampton. We moved to East Quad and I currently would like to thank Mr. Thiel for bringing the train back. And allowing
that is such an important piece of our puzzle.
That's a piece of
Very
it.
important.
Mr. Fine for really helping support that. But that train is allowing this district to operate in a very successful way. When that train is late, the phone calls to the offices and how do we get things moving and how do we get things going, it makes a big difference. So I guess my question kind of comes down to, does the legislation allow for the towns and the districts to cooperate together and allow for a radius to be drawn? And the last time I feel like, and trust me, I read it in a textbook, but Levittown was a mass housing development that provided for housing needed after the war and for the baby booming generation. By consolidating the funds from these towns to create such a type of environment, are districts allowed to purchase land outside in that radius from the train. Because,
Good question, yeah.
you know, what's affordable in East Hampton is different than what I could afford in East Quad. And we were pushed to East Quad because of what was affordable and how to raise a family that we wanted. I have 4 children. We're a large family, but most teachers love children. That's why they get into business. So to create affordable housing as an apartment style where a teacher is going to raise a family in an apartment is going to then force that turnover. Teachers love kids. They love
Great
families.
points, great points.
I think it's a great question. There's sort of 2 parts to the question. There's a question for our attorney, which we've dealt with before, which is right now, currently, the ability of the district to purchase anything outside of the school district and to expend funds outside of the school district. And that may be an issue for our assemblymen, you know, to perhaps figure out if there's a way that we can, that's one of the things we need to change. And then the issue is, I think we've been encouraged by the state and by the town to do shared services. And that's something that we've done on many levels. And there are Montauk school board members, other school board members that are here tonight. Thank you for coming. We all have shared the same concerns. So I think that's a really good question. And I don't know if someone wants to address it.
I don't know if there's an answer.
Is there an answer?
I don't know if it's an easy
Is there an
answer
answer
either.
that you'd like to address, or?
It crosses so many lines of questions.
Well, certainly for example, Southampton and East Hampton could work together the fund would allow the towns to work together. I will defer to your attorney as to what school districts can do as far as acquiring land, because I just haven't researched that. But, and what you could do or not, but certainly I think in cooperation with the towns, you might, you know, with the town funding, you know, you might be able to do something.
Can towns spend money outside of the town?
They certainly could do, you know, work together on a joint project, yeah. So that was.
Talked about this on the first call.
And I just also wanted to make another point, just the fact that so often we hear the term teacher being thrown around, but it truly is the staff of the district
We agree.
that help maintain and operate the building. Because without
You can't have one
every
without the other.
bit and every piece of the puzzle, your work isn't able to be accomplished. And I
We
don't
totally-
say
we all
that
agree
as
with
in
you.
anyone's not saying, I wanted to make that point because I know all of the staff are struggling with affordable housing.
Yes.
And I know you're making such a great point at trying to address these needs. But I do think that the train, and I say this over and over again, but the train and its continual support plays a role because like you said, the shovels aren't going to be in the ground for quite some time. And we're facing this crisis yesterday. And how do we retain teachers? Because right now we're not only losing teachers, we're losing the institutional knowledge that East Hampton has to offer. And if we start getting a turnaround, because right now we're seeing 4 years, 3 years, people turning around, but then you're going to start to see that 10-year group of people who are going to say, we can't afford to live here because it's not just affordable housing. We see 42% increases in the cost of heating the home. So Brent will be providing with that house. How do they heat it?
Well, it affects the commuter too, because
Yeah.
the same, on the flip side, fuel's more so now. You
Yeah,
know.
gasoline, we got a 6.2% inflation rate right now. And not, it's just, this is a picture that you pull one peg and everything starts to go with it. But I appreciate.
We've had steady rental, year-round rental, we're losing the rentals right now, left and right.
And I truly believe that the loss of the SALT deduction plays a large role in the increase in the cost of rentals. That loss of that deduction gets passed off to the renter. The person who owns a second home and looking to make use it as an income property is passing that cost over. That those deductions are passed on. So you know, this legislation on bringing SALT deduction back would be helpful.
It's in the House bill that was passed.
Yeah.
It's in the bill, the second bill that hasn't passed the Senate yet. So it's in the House bill, but it's not a done deal.
Jen? Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jay Levine. I'm not in the education business.
I'm not in the politics business. I'm not in the real estate business.
You are now.
So, in anticipation of the opportunity to speak to this group, I did a little light reading in advance of this meeting. And I read the Student Loan Debt Among Educators, a National Crisis, which was published in July by the National Education Association. And I want to share with you 2 or 3 data points that are going to provide a frame for the comments I'd like to make. The first data point is that 65% of educators under the age of 36 have student debt. 42% of educators under the age of 36 have student debt in excess of $65,000. Black educators with student debt carry an average student debt of about $72,000. 60% of educators with student debt indicate that their high student debt precludes them from saving money for things like buying a house. So I would argue or state that the challenge facing all of us is not simply the limited availability of housing. It's not simply the exorbitant cost of housing on the South Fork. It's not limited to the relatively modest compensation that school districts are able to pay, but it extends to the fact that educators are not able to create the capital, to save the money, to create the capital, to be able to buy homes. So as Peter indicated, create a real anchor in the community. So I'd like you to think about those numbers as I proceed with my comments here. So the challenge for all of us is not simply the availability, the numbers of houses, although we've spoken to that over the past hour, and I'm grateful that we have some experts related to that, because I have nothing to add to the comment about the number of houses available. But I can speak to the issue of affordability and access to capital. And capital is really the basis upon which people can afford to buy houses. So there are multiple strategies that we can address, that we can consider to address this 2-part problem. One part is the number of available housing units, which we've been addressing for the last hour. The second issue is housing affordability and access to capital so that people can actually purchase homes. I sit on the board of directors of Southampton Hospital, and the single greatest impediment that we confront in the recruitment of doctors and nurses and x-ray techs and physical therapists and dietary workers and housekeepers and the people that keep the lights on, the single greatest impediment is the cost of housing on the South Fork. I spent the last 3 years studying this issue for the hospital, and I came up with a strategy that the hospital has embraced and implemented. And I think it's a strategy that has applicability not only to this school district, but to all the school districts on Long Island, and especially school districts on the South Fork. So I want to take you on a little journey for a couple of minutes. Envision that we have an investment pool, a pot of money. And this investment pool can be utilized by homeowners to help offset the cost of a down payment. So if in fact we envision that a house costs, I'm going to use round numbers, $1 million, and we want to get to a down payment of 20%, because as the realtors and the bankers in the room know, at 20%, the home purchaser avoids the mortgage insurance, they avoid selected closing costs, they get a more favorable loan, interest rate, and so forth. Envision that an investment pool helps the purchaser bring the down payment up to 20%. The investment pool then would have an equity position in the real estate. And that equity position is realized once the house is either refinanced or sold by the homeowner. This concept, I stumbled upon this concept 3 years ago in my readings and research on this topic. And it's a concept called shared equity investments. And it was developed in the commercial real estate business. And those of you who are realtors may be familiar with it. So the concept grew out of the idea where, Jackie, you want to build a commercial building. You come to me and you say, Jay, I need to borrow $20 million. And I say, Jackie, I'll loan you the $20 million. You'll pay me back over 10 years at 3%. But in addition to that, I want an equity position in the commercial operation. I envisioned that that could be applied to residential home ownership. And we developed a program at the hospital where we've actually implemented this. So there's an investment pool. It provides up to 75% of the down payment, which is actually 15% of the purchase price. It could be less than that. And in return for that, the investment pool on the sale or refinance of property gets their share of the down payment back, plus a piece of the increment in the value of the real estate.
So that 5% or 15% once
A
sold
15%.
is worth a lot more to that investor as well.
Right, so
And how's that, who's the money
15%.
coming from?
Where's
Who's investing in the investment pool?
All right, I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
So let me just give you some rough numbers. If the investment pool puts in half of the down payment or 10% of the value of the house, upon the sale of the house or refinance, they get that 10% back. Plus, they get 25% of the increment. So the $1 million house sells for $1.1 million, 25% of the incremental $100,000 goes back to the investment fund. At 50% of the down payment, the investment pool gets 25% back. At 75% of the down payment, the investment pool gets 38% of the increment. Now, they also share in the decrement. If the value happens to go down, then the investment pool shares in the loss in the same way as they would share in gains. So you ask, where does the investment fund come from? Before the pandemic, I was putting together an LLC with local investors to do this. The pandemic came, I couldn't call people I didn't know and ask them to invest in this idea that I had. But in the process of doing my research, I stumbled on a financial management and investment company based in California that actually does what I envisioned. They're in the business, they take investments from institutional investors that want to diversify their portfolio into residential housing. So they take this money from pension plans and endowments and they invest in residential real estate. Now they partner, this is the interesting part, they partner with academic institutions. So their partners are school districts and universities. They partner with an organization, an academic institution. The academic institution has no contractual arrangement with this company. There's no financial arrangement. They share this program with their employees, and the employees have access to the capital. This company also provides tutorial assistance to first-time home buyers, because we all know it's complicated. They provide educational information. They have counselors that work with home buyers, and they're in the business of helping educators buy homes, including the non-teachers, all the people that work for educational systems. When I first contacted them, they were interested in getting involved with healthcare. My whole career has been in healthcare. I brought them into Southampton Hospital. We launched the program about 4, 5, 6 months ago. We now have 7 employees that are actively looking for homes in conjunction with this company. The name of the company is Landed, Landed. If you go onto their website, you'll be able to read all about the company. I have no business arrangement with Landed. I'm not an employee of Landed. I'm happily retired. I don't need a job, thank goodness. I'm not seeking employment. I'm sharing this with you because it's a concept that we've embraced at the hospital.
I fully believe that it has direct applicability, not only to academic institutions, but to town and local governments. I think it could be a tool that could be used there as well.
Would you
Okay,
only have,
you've created this fund now, right?
A fund exists, it's not my fund. Landed has a fund.
Southampton, but it's for Southampton Hospital specifically,
Yes,
employees,
yes,
okay?
yes.
can they,
My granddaughter is probably one of them, she works at Southampton Hospital.
Well, if she wants to buy a house, she should,
I think she mentioned that.
check it out.
To look at, right?
can they purchase a house anyway? I mean, do they
Anywhere.
have to be in Southampton or
No.
they could purchase a house?
No, they can purchase a house in East Quad, is that what you're saying? They can purchase
A
a
lot
house
of
in East
people are moving
Quad.
to Quad.
My daughter lives in Hampton Bays, they purchased a house in Hampton Bays.
Okay. Thank you.
So I think that I just want to make sure that we have time to address it else. I think that's very, very interesting.
Can I just tell you,
Yes.
among the school districts that they're working with are at Boston, Massachusetts, Chelsea, Massachusetts, Washington DC, Denver, Portland, Oregon, Oakland, California. They put together an arrangement in Santa Cruz County where they created a consortium of school districts in Santa Cruz County, and that's a model that I would encourage you to consider. They're in discussions with MIT and Fordham University. They've got programs set up at Stanford University, University of California, San Francisco, University of Colorado, other universities. This is an established enterprise.
Thank you. It's very, very.
All right. I'm happy to answer questions now or later. if you'd like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? I can't see who it is. Yes, please, if I can't see anyone else.
My name is Jane, here I am living in Kansas. I've done children's school, I've been resident for about 20 years. And I've been sort of coming out here since the 60s, right? And I've been doing, the last couple of years, I've been trying to get more educated around affordable housing, around development, things like that. So I'm really excited that you're doing this and wanted to be here. I just have a few ideas I wanted to throw out. And my first sort of idea is something super boring, but I mean, I feel like we as a town, whether we're citizens or people like you or people in all of our committees and boards, we need to be working on some analytics and numbers. And I feel that, we hear things anecdotally, but we are not looking and tracking numbers on a consistent basis that really helps us all understand, like, what is our housing stock? What is our land use? What's being developed? What's being torn down? And as part of that, Supervisor Benskoy said we have 600 affordable housing units, which is, it sounds like an amazing number, but I had heard somewhere that there's a model somewhere floating around that might say that we have a 4,000 unit deficit around the need for affordable housing. So I don't know if that's the right number, but as a start, right, I feel like we just need some real analytics and dashboards and things that we are all looking at. And as a part of that, it would be great if the town had very specific objectives that they would like to work towards every year, right, in terms of numbers. And I know there are vagaries of markets and things like that, but that's just one issue that I wanted to bring up, and we have to dive into that directly. Number two, I think that we should be looking as many other creative affordable housing, middle class housing models as there are. And I know the town of Shore has been exploring some of them. There is one model that I've come across that I wanted to float to you, something actually floated to the board, I sent a note to the board in September. Martha's Vineyard, which is a community that has some similarities to a lot of issues we have, uses a land trust model, which I won't go into details here, consent. But what's really great about it is it basically, the land exists and then they either build homes or rehab homes that can be for rental or for ownership. And the trust retains the land so that it's always in affordable status. And then the home itself can appreciate, partly can be, the appreciation can be enjoyed by the homeowner. And they usually use a lottery system. But one of the key things, which is an idea that I feel like we need to get closer to, is it's a lot of private fundraising, a lot of private fundraising. And I feel like as a town, given the wealth of our population, we are not fundraising enough yet around affordable housing. And I feel like we should have some models that just really do, more of that. So that's my second idea. The third relates to CPF, and I just wanted to, since we have someone here and the issue came up, does the CPF acquisition take away from available land for that? So I just want to check these numbers. I have that for the 25 years, 20 or 25 years, the CPF has been in existence. East Hampton, through the CPF, has purchased 2,200 acres. And of that, about 700, I think, is either active ag land or land along the shore. And so by my calculation, that is 0.5% of all land in East Hampton. But one thing that has started to crop up, it's very small, is some CPF acquisitions are being made that have structures on them. There are 2 in East Hampton Village that have just been or about to be done. And the houses are going to be ripped down. And I think that is something that we should all be vigilant around, is whether that is the right thing to do, to take housing that could be for workforce housing or other things and sort of rip them down. So that's just one other thing. So those are my 3 basic ideas.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before you, I can't see the, yes.
Good evening, I'm Lee Silverman, I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Suffolk County.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. First thing I want to say, this is quite unusual to have a school board interested in housing. Usually school boards are bananas, meaning build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. So the fact that you're having this discussion, is amazing. Habitat of Suffolk has recently become a partner with the town of East Hampton. We built one house last year. We're supposed to build another house this coming year if we can figure out some zoning issues and so forth that my good friend Tom knows all about. And we look forward to being part of the solution going forward. I'm going to make an absolute advertisement as to why we should be one of the prime partners. And I definitely would like my hands on that entire overlay district to build single-family homes. I'm not going to bore you with details. I'd be glad to answer questions later or whatever. But the way our program works is our homeowners do not need a down payment. They do 300 hours of sweat equity and move a down payment. So their entire amount of money they need to purchase the house up front is $3,000. So in a typical affordable housing program, and there are many affordable housing programs with down payments as low as 5%. Typically, a family would still have to come up with anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 in down payment money at closing. Our program gets nothing. The other thing with our program is the way we work and we back engineer everything. The HUD definition of affordable housing is the homeowner is paying no more than 30% of their income for their mortgage, their taxes, and their homeowner insurance. And the way our program is structured is that is what they pay. Regardless of, we know what their income is, we take 30% of that, that is their payment. Okay, and again, I'm not going to go into the details of how that work, but we do make that work. Lastly, in terms of the discussion earlier about preferences and not preferences and so forth, a lot of serious FHA rules, regulations, and so forth that you definitely want to be on the right side of, especially if you're taking the federal funds. When we qualify our homeowners, we qualify them on 1, an ability to pay, 2, do they have a housing need, and 3, what is their ability to partner with us. That third qualification of their ability to partner with us allows us, within the confines of the law, we do not break any federal laws, okay? But it gives us a little flexibility that other organizations may or may not have in terms of, are we gearing something towards first responders, are we gearing towards teachers and so forth. Our basic policy in Suffolk County is for our program, is people have to either live or work within Suffolk County. So we would take anybody in Suffolk County and offer them houses in East Hampton. But again, I think someone made a comment, what does it matter, whether they live here or they move in here, you need the workers here. Okay, so I'm looking forward to partnering, with the town and making the partnership stronger. I was an advocate of Mr. Suppleman Teal's legislation. I look forward, I've already offered whatever I can do to help get these resolutions passed in the 5 towns. I will do what we can, and Habitat for Humanity definitely supports this legislation. I would like to see it passed. And as I said, I want that whole Lake District. You give me that 4 homes per acre zoning, we're much
Lee, I have a question.
Sure.
How many homes have you built at once?
The most
How many have you built in a year? I don't know.
we typically, right now, we're geared to build 8 to 10 houses a year throughout Suffolk County.
Okay.
I've told ad nauseum, I mean, the people at the county planning office are tired of me hearing that. The reason we're building 8 to 10 now is that's my stream of land that I'm getting from Suffolk County. They've been extremely stingy over the last couple of years. If all of a sudden I see where I can get 20 parcels a year over the next couple of years, I will ramp up. I will get 20 houses built. I mean, our program is scalable. For us to build in East Hampton, it's tricky. Right now, 1 a year is what we can do because we're centered out in Middle Island. We have that same thing with Trade Parade. But if I knew that we were going to go 4, 10, whatever number here, I would just put a satellite office out here and we got them going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Flight. I'm on the Montauk School Board, and it's interesting. So much of what's been said is pertinent to me. I've just finished building onto my house for my in-laws to move in with me. I'm an EMT. My wife's a teacher at East Hampton High School, and it's absolutely real what we're talking about. I do foresee one roadblock, and this is even on my own experience, but I'm sure everyone in this room can speak to it. Has anyone tried to hire a contractor lately? Wait time. If we're trying to build, then people with more money are going to get the contractors. If there is a way to incentivize local builders such that there's a tax break if they work on municipal projects, something along those lines, to get these projects to the front of the list to get done, I think that will go a long way to fast tracking and getting this done. The other thing we haven't talked about, the other side of this coin is, yes, it's housing, but it's also teachers' income. I think as all boards, Montauk, everywhere, we will need to reassess what a living wage is for a teacher out there and look at our salary schedules and say, are they realistic? Is this a viable job for people to have and live out there? And that's another part of this conversation I think we need to be having in tandem with the housing conversation itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
She couldn't see you, I told her.
Sorry about that.
I've spoken before, so you gotta jump up for it. I'm very brief. My name is Michael Angelo. My family's owned property in Montauk since 1968. My wife and I are full-time residents of East Hampton as of the last 3 years. Both my daughters one of my daughters lives in Montauk, one lives in East Hampton. For me, I'm very lucky because they have worked very, very hard, and both my children own their own homes already, and they're young. However, I've got a 2-year-old granddaughter who's going to be starting school soon. So I am still, even though I'm retired and comfortable and my children are well taken care of, I am going to be involved with the problems you have with the teachers. there have been a dozen different good ideas thrown out tonight. Who's in charge? Who's in charge of the next step? I think the district should select 2 people, the town should select 2 people, have Mr. Silverman or someone with some expertise, form a committee. Otherwise, we're just spinning wheels for the next 5 years. And this problem is not going to go away, obviously. So I think we're not going to be everyone's got stuff to do, no question about it. But somebody's got to step up and say, these are the people we need to look at all these different ideas and say, well, the idea that Mr. Levine proposed, that's a really good one. That's easy, right? The idea about giving rental credits to landlords, that involves state legislation. There, the different ideas have different levels of complexity. So I think you need to have a committee form to sift through and come up with 6 great ideas, all right? And you have a program, okay, you can, if you're a potential home buyer, you can do this. If you're a landlord, you can do this. And have a series or a number of possible solutions, because the problem needs a lot of solutions.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. I think that, I think that you should agree exactly with what the board has discussed. Every journey begins with a step. And for us, we've been having this conversation as a board. It was really, we're so honored to have so many public officials here who were doing so much to advance this. And I think that our next step is certainly to
It's a
talk
big
about that.
step. The board coming together, having this forum.
But it's something that we're serious, and I think that this school board has, we've formed committees before and worked in partnership to get things done that we see now that, have actually happened. And so that is absolutely our plan to do, and I think that we want very much to do that.
And we have a big state and little control.
Yeah,
So, really, that's.
There are other school districts with the same problem.
They all
I would imagine Montauk Springs and all of us have that problem. And for us, it's a good step for us to consider helping our staff get houses out of here.
Right.
But if we join together, it's an East End problem. And have a separate committee, as this gentleman, I think, suggested, that tries to solve the problem, not just for the East Hampton School District, but all the East End school districts.
Right.
And if, for instance, the town wanted to help us, they naturally would want to help the other school districts in the town, right?
And we all have the same issue, and we have to do it together. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I mean, we just started it. We started the ball rolling. And now it's where it picks up, it's.
Hold on a second, just a motion here. Is there anyone who, I thought I saw someone over here. Okay, did you want to come up and? I'm sorry.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Brian Anchorage. I am a social worker at East End Pediatrics. My husband is works at Pearson Middle School, High School. We live in Sag Harbor, and I am a member of East End BMB. Yes, in my backyard.
Yes, I like that.
Reference to the BMBs. And a few of us are here today. Michael, founder, Katie, and Sue.
Picture in the paper.
We are here to offer support we're meeting monthly. Right now, we're building a coalition of affordable community housing advocates on the East End. We are in total support with Fred Thiel's legislation, and we see one of our roles is educating the community between now and November to get behind this and pass this referendum. And so I just wanted to, let everyone know we'll be at the door as you're leaving. Sign up to join our mailing list. We're meeting with Peter Van Scoya. We're meeting with local elected officials, showing our support for all of the important, one of the biggest hindrances to all these amazing ideas is the lack of public support at the end of the day. So we feel like we can be that army to educate the community and be there when these votes need to happen. We're also having a housing rally, a community housing rally. We have pamphlets to hand out as you leave. This Saturday at the Windmill in Sag Harbor, 11 to 12:30, there will be hot chocolate and children's activities. Senior's going to be there building houses with kids. incredible speakers. So, you know, we are here to support you, and I think it is going to take more than a village to push this initiative forward. So you've got an army behind you with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't tell you one. Break my glasses.
Hi. And I have been in the affordable housing business for over 40 years. I addressed the town, East Hampton, back in 1979, I believe, with Hope was the running the show, and I was with HUD at the time, and got a tremendously negative response from everybody that was listening to my presentation as to how affordable housing can be brought to East Hampton. I think what we've done here is truly impressive, and I think part of it has to happen, and I think a number of people have said this, we have to get out of our own silos. You know, you are in your silo, housing folks are in their silo. There are a lot of groups out here on the East End that are active in housing. I don't know if you're familiar with a number of them, but starting with the Regional Plan Association, Oxford University is very involved in housing, Long Island, but I would encourage you to form this kind of committee to get in touch with the housing groups out here and see what we can figure out together, because it'd be a hell of a lot easier than just continuing in a silo, which doesn't get me there.
Thank you very much. Jake, do you want to add something else? And then, I don't know if you'd like to say anything else, and any school board members will reference.
I would just like to pick up on what John Ryan said. If there is interest in developing a shared equity ownership program, I would encourage collaboration with other school districts to do it in unison. This is a vehicle through which you can put capital in the hands of people to buy homes, and it will be more effective if we could collaborate with the other school districts on the East End.
Thank you. Well, we have a school board meeting next Tuesday. So this was a special forum which allowed us to bring everyone together. We have a school board meeting next Tuesday, and I think it would be, the anticipated next steps for us as a board would be for everyone to digest a little bit here. Carrie has been in the city, so taking notes the whole time. Great, thank you, Carrie. Those will be posted online for everybody to see. LTV has videoed this whole forum. And I think what we usually do is talk about old business in our school board meeting. So perhaps we could set aside a hunk of time, 25 minutes or something like that, to wrap and summarize and talk about within the school board our next steps to partner with the town to make sure we're sitting on the appropriate committees, taking all this good information and continuing to move forward. Does that sound like it makes sense?
Yeah.
So we'll schedule this on next Tuesday on old business to continue the conversation.
Yeah, we can discuss and kind of take away from this meeting and think about a little bit, what do we want? Because, we talked about, as one speaker spoke about silos. That's why we're here. We're trying to branch it out from here because we can't do it by ourselves. And, I don't know if you've watched any school board meetings, but every time we speak of something, I have to look at John Heidelberg and go, are we allowed to do that? Because there's lots of things we can't do. You talk about taxpayer money and you talk about roadblocks and obstacles. We are probably the leader in that whole forum. So, yeah, we're going to try to break them and do our best, but with that also comes time. So, you take all those things, put them together. It's going to take a long time to get this off the ground. And we also want to do it right. We want to get the buy-in. I know this is, like Peter will talk. He talks to Laura, but we're all talking together. Fred, we talk a couple times a year. It's one of those things that, there's a lot to it. And if there wasn't, it'd be fixed already. We wouldn't be here. So here we are.
Jackie, we have a hand.
Oh, someone that?
There, hand? Yeah.
Welcome to you.
Jack Burton.
Oh, Jack, come on up, Jack. I couldn't see you all that. You should sit up front.
They told me it was on YouTube.
And I knew it was a name, Jack.
Are you the real Jack Turner, the famous Jack Turner?
Yes, this is me, and let me tell you, for the first time, I agree with you. All of the schools have to be involved at the same time. We have to get together. But you guys, I really want to speak to the three of you, because I know that when you try to do housing, you can have about property, and the property in Montauk is out of sight, you just can't buy it. But Tom, there's a strip of land in Montauk, where you make, just as you enter the village.
Hey, Jack, don't say it publicly. Yeah, just say it. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Wow.
Don't say it.
There's land that the state has preserved that goes, that's, they're gonna build, they say, a bridge over Fort Pond to bypass the village. I'm a Montauk person, that will never happen. When we get the state, Tom, it's got to do the Lions Field, LYONS. That property that goes behind the library, beyond Westlake Drive. So a lot of property there, it's not reserved land, it's land that they're waiting to build a highway. It's never gonna get done. So Fred, if you could look into that, and Tom,
It's part of the Montauk point.
I'll work with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. You're welcome.
Anybody else, or should we, right, we're not too far over.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you so much, this has been very helpful, everybody, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason, thank you. You're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a fantastic evening.